It's now my pleasure to introduce today's commencement speaker, our own Dr. Rick Goodgame. Dr. Goodgame is a professor of medicine in our Department of Internal Medicine, where he is a gastroenterologist and a therapeutic gastrointestinal endoscopist. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Vanderbilt University, his medical degree from Johns Hopkins, and completed his internal medicine training at Johns Hopkins and also at the Massachusetts General Hospital. He completed his gastroenterology training at Baylor. For the first 12 years of his career, he concentrated on global health. He spent 2 years, for example, working for the Rockefeller Foundation in the Caribbean on the island of St. Lucia. There he studied and treated schistosomiasis. This is a disease that's caused by parasitic flatworms, and it affects actually 200 million people worldwide, for example. He subsequently spent 10 years at one of Africa's great medical schools, the Makerere University School of Medicine and Mulago Hospital in Kampala, Uganda. He was a medical missionary with a principal assignment to teach internal medicine in the medical school and to supervise the internal medicine training program. During this time, he studied and wrote extensively about HIV and the epidemic in Africa. Dr. Goodgame and his family returned to the United States in 1990. At that time, he joined Baylor College of Medicine as a professor of medicine, and he also was director of gastroenterology hepatology and their fellowship training program there. He somehow found the time to serve as chief of gastrointestinal endoscopy at Ben Taub Hospital for about 20 years. We were fortunate to welcome Dr. Goodgame to UTMB in 2008, just after Hurricane Ike, when he was invited to help with the internal medicine residency training program. He remained director of that program until 2017. In all the positions that Dr. Goodgame has held at every institution where he has worked, some portion of his work has always been in education. That's been extremely important to him. He's earned more accolades for teaching and education than I can even begin to name. He's been a hooter at many of our commencement ceremonies, and I'm delighted to welcome him here in a slightly different role as our commencement speaker, Dr. Goodgame.
Parents and family, I congratulate you on these, your graduates. Thank you so much for the countless ways you've helped these graduates. Graduates, I hold you all in very high esteem. Congratulations. I want to tell you a story. I usually tell stories, you know. I want to tell you a story about Francis Collins. For the last 9 years, Dr. Francis Collins has been head of the National Institutes of Health. He runs that organization. It has an annual budget of $32 billion. It's the largest research funding organization in the world. He's our nation's chief scientist. He also is an interesting guy. Some people would say he's a little quirky. He loves motorcycles. He has a big Harley Road King classic motorcycle that he rides to the NIH every day if it's not raining. He likes to go fast. I heard him say that on the Stephen Colbert show. He's a regular attender on Colbert's Report and the Late Night with Stephen Colbert. He gets on that show because he's a guitar-playing singer-songwriter. He takes 60s and 70s rock and roll songs, he's about my age, and turns them into silly songs about genes and sequencing and genetic and scientists and the like. He also is outspoken about his religious faith. He has a website about God. He wrote a book about God called The Language of God, and that's where I first read about his story. Before he was the director of the NIH, he was the director of the Human Genome Project. That project lasted 15 years. It was a massive undertaking to sequence all 20,000 human genes in the human genome. I'm amazing this guy is getting that kind of stuff. Right. It's 20,000 genes. Did you get that? Oh, okay, thank you very much. Anyway, he finished that job 2 years ahead of schedule and millions of dollars under budget. Before he was the director of the Human Genome Project, he was a basic science geneticist. His team invented a brand new way to sequence genes very rapidly. The old method was called gene walking because of the way the proteins moved along the genome. His method was called gene jumping, and he revolutionized the whole process of gene sequencing. And before that, he was just like you. He was a graduating senior from the University of North Carolina School of Medicine, sitting there like you're sitting there. He didn't know what the next 40 years would bring into his life. You don't know what those years are going to bring into your life. But he had a strong impression. I've read some of the stuff he has reflecting on his time at your stage. He had a strong impression that his life would make a big, powerful, positive difference in the lives of many people and patients. These are my 4 points. Number 1, I believe you will make a powerful, positive effect in the lives of many people. Number 2, I do not believe that you will make a positive effect on every patient you see. You know, medical systems aren't that robust. Funding is not that generous to patients or to institutions. And human disease has too much a spectrum of severity for that to be true. But if you love your patients, every one of them, that's 3, 4, you will have a powerful, positive effect on the lives of many patients, one patient at a time. Now, here's the story. In 1989, Collins had just worked out the detail of gene jumping, and I think he was on a roll. He got a letter in the mail saying, "Dear Christian Medical Society member." He had gotten this same letter several years before. "We are again hosting our annual CME, Continuing Medical Education Conference, for medical missionaries in Africa, in Nairobi, Kenya, this summer. We're again asking you to volunteer 3 weeks of your time, go to a mission hospital in Africa, take care of the business that those missionaries usually do, treating patients, making rounds, etc., while they're at their conference." It struck him differently that time. He talked to his college-age daughter, said, "Hey, would you like to go to Africa?" "Africa, yes. I've always wanted to go to Africa." "Yeah, let's go. You've even said you want to go to Africa. Let's go to Africa." They went to Africa. They went to Eku, Nigeria, small mission hospital, rural Nigeria. And while the people who were normally at that hospital were there. And he got oriented. His daughter got a job to do. They figured out inpatient, outpatient, various other things, and went to work. And by about 4 days, he was profoundly discouraged. It was a classic case of culture shock. But here's what he says in his book. "I was exhausted, frustrated, discouraged. There were not enough beds. There were patients on the floor, in the halls, on the verandas. There wasn't enough food. The whole outskirts of the hospital looked like a tent camp. Families had to come and cook food for their own patients. The severity of disease was just terrible. People wouldn't come to the hospital until the very last minute, even had to be carried there. High mortality rate. But the thing that bothered Dr. Collins the most was the things he was seeing were preventable and treatable infectious diseases. It was as if there was no public health infrastructure at all. Malaria, tuberculosis, typhoid fever, tetanus, preventable or treatable diseases early in their course, people were dying. He said, I can't believe that I thought I would have a positive influence in this place. I don't believe you're going to have a positive influence on every patient you see. But if you love every single patient, then you will have a positive influence. Love is God's way of relating. Love is a fullness that you have, that you're ready to empty into someone else's life. Love is that intention to promote the well-being of every patient, especially the one that's right here, right now, by you. Love is that commitment to do the right thing at the right time in the right way. And if you love, you will make a difference, one patient at a time. So he was really discouraged. The gloom was laying heavy on his head. He was there in the outpatient clinic the next day, and he saw his next patient being carried in by the family and some attendants. He was put on the stretcher, and he walked over, and he reached out, and he felt for the pulse, and began to engage. He could speak a little English. He was a rural Nigerian farmer, a young guy. He'd been sick for about 3 months. And as Collins was palpating the radial pulse, he was having trouble. Sometimes the pulse was there, sometimes it wasn't there. He tried the other arm and he got it, and then it went away. Then it came back, and then it went away. He looked at the patient's chest, and he saw whenever the patient took a breath of air, the pulse went away. Whenever he exhaled air from his lung, the pulse came back. Collins said, I've read about this. I've taught about this. I've never seen it. This is a paradoxical pulse. This patient has pericardial tamponade. Things came to him real fast. We're seeing so much tuberculous disease in every organ system. Tuberculous pericarditis must be common here. This patient has a lot of fluid in the sac that surrounds our heart. The fluid builds up because of the infection there in the sac around the heart and compresses the heart, so the heart cannot any longer perform its normal pumping function. He was thinking, he said, we could start the patient on anti-tuberculous chemotherapy, but it would take weeks for it to work. The only thing that we can do to save his life before giving his medicine is to take a needle and put it under the breastbone and draw the fluid out from around the heart, a pericardiocentesis. He excused himself from the outpatient clinic, and he went around and talked to everybody in the hospital, and he said, hey, by the way, who's the pericardiocentesis person? Who's the what? And he went through the whole hospital. There was nobody there who had ever seen or performed a pericardiocentesis. And they said, Dr. Collins, you're the guy. You're the guy. He knew the patient was going to expire if something wasn't done. He went around, got a syringe, a long needle, a stopcock, a piece of rubber tubing to get that fluid out. Trembling probably, he doesn't say that. He went back, he told the patient in detail the severity of his condition, the fact that the procedure was dangerous. If the needle went too far, it would hit the heart or lacerate the coronary arteries and kill the patient. If it was successful, there was a chance that he could be cured by anti-tuberculous chemotherapy. The patient said, "Doctor, if you can, please help me." Semi-recumbent position, angled the needle in the left xiphosternal angle, advanced the needles, sucking, and hoping not to penetrate the left ventricle. And just a few seconds after advancing toward the left shoulder, there was a gush of red fluid into the syringe. He thought immediately, like anybody who's ever done a bloody paracentesis, I'm in the ventricle, I've lacerated the coronary artery, the patient's a goner. But as he emptied one or few syringefuls, he realized that's not dark, red, thick blood. That's the blood-tinged pericardial fluid. This is working. This is working. He got a quart and maybe some more, and the whole countenance of the patient completely was transformed. A smile came to his face. That was enough for him. He pulled out. Everything was great. That night, the patient peed off all of his excess fluid. When he saw the patient the next day, he was a new person. But for Collins, the gloom was still there. The negative, what am I doing here? Terrible place, terrible situation, terrible illness. He said, even that man, I did something for him, but he probably won't take his medicines, or he can't afford his medicines, or one of those other infections will kill him. What good have I really done? He was rounding, he greeted the patient, and he saw he was better, and he went to step away. And the patient said, "Excuse me, doctor, but I don't think you know why you're here." Collins was amazed that that African man could look directly into his heart. In fact, he didn't know. The man said, "I can answer that question. You're here because of me." Collins said, very literarily, "I put a needle close to that man's beating heart, but his words were like a stake driven through my own heart. I had come to Africa with grandiose and egotistical expectations of doing good on a grand scale. I'd overlooked the importance of simple, loving kindness, directed one human being to another, one patient at a time. I believe you're going to make a powerful, positive influence on the lives of many patients. Not every patient, but if you love, love is that fullness that pours itself into another. Love is that intention to promote the well-being of every single patient. Love is that commitment to do the right thing at the right time in the right way. If you love every single patient, you will make a powerful, positive difference in the lives of many, many, one patient at a time. May God bless you as you do it.